Hi, I'm Carl Franklin. In this episode of Blazor Train, I've invited Don from DevExpress to show me their data access scaffolding tools. Now, you know me. I'm always trying to find ways to make plumbing code easier to write and maintain. And all that CRUD code between the UI and the back end is the essence of plumbing code. So I think it's worth checking out how DevExpress approaches data access plumbing. And that's coming up right now, right here on Blazor Train. So I have with me again Don Wibier from DevExpress. Hi, Don.
Hi, Carl.
So you've been following Blazor Train, and you know that I'm really into reducing the friction to getting a full API layer and data layer and all of that stuff up. I've embraced the repository pattern. I've taken that to its logical extreme in WebAssembly with IndexedDB and created repositories for SQL Server and for Dapper on the back end, even for blob file storage. So one thing that I haven't done is used your Developer Express scaffolding, and you keep telling me how awesome it is, and I want the passengers to know what is available.
Yeah, well, I'm glad you reached out for this because I'm obviously more than happy to show you that. And what I've already done is I have installed our DevExpress package, which comes with quite a bunch of nice design time features within Visual Studio, and this is exactly what we're going to use.
So is this package just for, can I get just the Blazor stuff plus the data stuff, or do I have to get the big package that has all the platforms support?
Well, it depends. If you want to download and try it out, which you can for 30 days, then you'll get like all the bells and whistles, because you can also check out all the bells and whistles. But once you decide like, okay, I'm going to go for a license, and you're only going to go for the web license once you run the installer or once you activate the current installation, then the other packages and products will be removed, basically.
Oh, okay. All right. So what do you got?
All right, yeah, so the first thing that I do want to show you, because we have seen so much demos with the standard Microsoft project template, so probably you've seen a bit enough of the bluish and the header and the footer and stuff.
Right.
So if you install our DevExpress installer, you'll get a nice DevExpress project template for Blazor.
Okay.
And yeah, so by installing it and hit the file new, you'll get the project template gallery here.
Great.
And in this case, I've obviously used it a couple of times, so I will now select this one. And in this case, you will get pretty much the same options and features as the default Microsoft project template.
Okay.
So I'll hit next. Here we have our DevExpress template gallery, and in this case we want to go for a Blazor application. So what you'll see here is we still have the three hosting models, so the server application, the WebAssembly hosted, and the WebAssembly. Then there are a couple of other things we might want to talk about some other time.
Okay.
But in this case, I will just go for the WebAssembly hosted application,
All right,
because it makes sense to use that one.
Sure.
Well, next we ship these templates with a number of themes, and we have our Blazing Berry theme, which looks like this. We can also go for a dark theme,
and
we have a Bootstrap and this one. So you want to go for the dark one?
Yeah, I like the dark theme.
Yeah. Okay. Let's go for that one.
Okay.
And then we have a couple of other settings. So for instance, if you want to do a progressive web application and localization, we support that as well for the following languages. So once we're set up, I'm going to hit create.
So right now, do you have stuff in here from DevExpress, or is this the same as a regular WebAssembly hosted application?
This is typically the same as the regular project, with the exception that everything is already set up to use the DevExpress controls as well.
Great. All right. So that's cool. Now, is the scaffolding part of the tools that were loaded by default?
The scaffolding is not necessarily, you don't need this project template to do the scaffolding.
Oh, I
but
see.
yeah, it's here because I downloaded the installer and I installed the DevExpress package on my machine. That's why it is available.
Got it.
So let's see how this looks. As you can see, we selected the dark mode, so you have this nice dark theme.
Yeah.
We even put in a small demo with our data grid installed, just like the demo that you're familiar with,
Sure.
but then with our controls. And then there is some cool stuff. So if we would resize the window, you'll see that there is some stuff being made responsive.
Nice.
You see? But now let's talk about the scaffolding. And for this, yeah, we need to obviously have some database, which I have already prepared, and we need to include a couple of things in the project.
Okay.
So let's head back to Visual Studio, and for this, I will use the package manager to add the entity framework packages and scaffold the database that I have prepared.
Great.
So the easiest way to do that is we need to execute the install package and then the Microsoft Entity Framework Core.SQL Server in this case.
Mm-hmm.
Once that has been set up, I will add another package, which is the Microsoft Entity Framework Core.Tools.
Right.
Because then we can scaffold the database into entity framework models. Alright, so with this setup, I can now enter another command, and that command is the scaffold DB context. The database that I've set up is a database that's probably quite familiar with you. It is the Chinook database, which holds artists, tracks, etc., etc.
You know what I find interesting about the Chinook database is that the primary keys aren't identity generated. They're not auto-generated.
Yeah, you're right. But these days, because the database has moved from, I think, Codeplex to GitHub or something, and now you can actually decide which model you want to have. They have made a couple of changes. Yeah, they also have a couple of different databases now that they support.
Wow.
So now you can actually decide if you want to have like auto-incremented fields or not, or auto-generated fields. But anyway, so in this case, I will give the scaffold DB context command here. I'll enter the parameters like my database name, the database server, etc., etc., and I specify an output directory. So the models will be placed into the models/ef.
Right.
But then I will need to move the models to the shared folder and only leave the DB context in, because we want to use the models on the client as well. Right. Remember?
Yep. This is stuff that I've done a bazillion times.
Exactly.
You have to move stuff around.
Yeah. But fortunately, that's not too difficult.
Nope.
So we'll get this nice potential sensitive information warning here. So let's get rid of that. That is somewhere here. Remove it altogether. And now let's add the connection string to my config file here. Like this. So far, not really exciting. We obviously also need to set up the DB context in the dependency injection configuration, and we can do that by entering 2 lines of code, or you could do it in 1 line as well, but I'd rather keep it a bit simple here. So in this case, I'll get the config string, and then I'm gonna add the DB context here. So straight on. Let me include a couple of namespaces. get everything here. What do you think, Carl? Should I do the namespace change as well?
You don't need to, I don't think. I mean, that's probably something you should probably do in the future. I also, if you want to go for a low friction thing, you just take the namespace out altogether.
Yeah, you're right. But guess we're going to leave it in.
Yeah, it's just a demo.
Yeah, exactly. All right, so let's make sure that everything compiles up so we can actually do the scaffolding.
Right.
Which is what we were waiting for. Well, so far so good. And now we're going to use one of the DevExpress design time features here. So I want to create a web API controller that enables me to manage the artists in this case.
Okay.
So how do I do that? Well, I just right click on the controllers folder. I'm gonna hit add controller. And what you'll see now, and this is because I downloaded the software and installed it on my machine, I now can go to the DevExtreme tab. And here it shows us the possibility to use a DevExtreme API controller with actions using Entity Framework. You see that?
Okay, sure.
We also have another one, but we're not going to discuss that too much right now because you are probably aware that we also have our own object relational mapping tool, which is called XPO.
Right.
And that object relational mapping tool supports more than a dozen database backends out of the box by only chasing the connection string, which is quite cool, but well, we could talk about that another time.
Okay.
Anyway, we can scaffold that by using the XPO technology as well. But in this case, we are working with Entity Framework, so let's just do that.
Sure.
Yeah, and now I can follow the steps that will pop up, and the scaffolder will now check what is configured in your application. And in this case, we just need to select the Shino context as a data context class.
Right.
I was going to manage the artists, so I'm going to pick the artists here, and it's going to create an artist controller.
Cool.
So it will take a couple of seconds before it creates this controller, and yeah, I think it's quite interesting to show a bit of that controller code as well. So here it is, and what you'll see is that it is using dependency injection to get that context.
Right.
And the most interesting thing here is that get method will receive a data source load options. And this is something that comes with DevExpress because this data source load options object is typically the state of the grid which is sent over to the server. And what this means is that you are now able to perform queries which are sorted, grouped, filtered, and paged on the server.
Nice. And that's kind of like the, you know, if you look back through the history of Blazor Train, that was a sticking point. How to, and I tried to do it by serializing link queries and sending them from the client to the server, and ultimately decided to make a separate class that had all the filter settings on it and the sorting and the ordering, and that's exactly what you've got here, isn't it?
Yeah, no, this is typically a two-step phase because this object is being serialized as you were trying as well. But this is only the state. So this is the state of the grid concerning like which columns are being sorted on, and is it ascending, descending, which page are we on, the page size, and it's just the state.
So if you're using a DevExpress grid, the user sets all those things, so you don't even have to get in the middle. It just goes right to this and gives them a server-side filtered set for what they're looking at right now. So if they only have 5 items per page, you get 5 items back, for example. But if you're, it seems to me, if you're doing your own client and calling the API controller yourself, you still can set those options, right?
Oh yeah, of course. Yeah. You can use this technology because this data source options object is also available in Blazor.
Mm.
So you could actually populate that on the client and send it over to this web API endpoint, and then it will deal with that.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, it is. And as I said, it's like a two-step thing. So this is basically the only the state.
Right.
But now typically we need to do something with that state information. We need to construct the query on the database and get like the results that we want.
Mm.
And that is also a very powerful thing here, because what we also provide is a data source loader.
Okay.
And this data source loader is a class which takes that data source load options, and it will figure out the most efficient way to get that data. And in this case, we get the artists here, which is a link query.
Yeah.
We are passing that in that method, and that method will alter the link query in a way that the most optimal SQL statement will be executed to get the data that we want.
Yeah, that's cool.
So we are already putting in some stuff here. So if you have a large table, you can make it a bit more efficient by first selecting all the IDs and then do a select from that table where ID in that. So that's going to be like a two-step thing.
Sure.
And as you can see, we support that already, but by default we turn it off.
Right, okay.
But just by uncommenting these two lines, it's enabled.
Wow, nice.
For the rest, we also include the post. In this case, we support the put and we do the delete. And there is a bit of code here that is needed to get everything properly loaded from and to specific things. And with this in place, we have actually set up this method in seconds.
Cool.
All right, so now that we have set up this API, it's obviously also quite interesting to see how this works on the client application.
Right.
And for this, I will go to the grid page that was displaying the weather forecast, and we're going to change that to display the artists. And for this, we'll need to do a couple of things here. The first thing is that I will need to rename that HTTP, just otherwise my code will not work.
Okay.
And I will need the navigation manager. What I also need, I would typically do that somewhere else, but in this case I will do it in the file. I need to do the DX Blazor application 16 dot server dot models dot ef. Remember, that was in the shared.
We didn't change the namespace, yeah.
So typically this is not for production use.
Yeah.
Anyway, let's get rid of this code because this is going to be slightly different.
Mm-hmm.
I will now use another approach to bind data on the grid, which is a very powerful feature that comes with the DevExpress Blazor grid. I'm now going to use an object which is going to be bound to the grid. And the interesting thing is, by using this object instead of like a list or an array or whatever, the grid will check what kind of object it is and it will behave according to that.
So it's doing a bit of reflection to figure out what it's got.
Exactly.
Change its behavior accordingly.
Yep. And what I can do now is in the uninitialized, I will just call that API/artists/get, and this data is now assigned to this grid DevExtreme data source.
Interesting.
And this construction will make sure that client load options are being sent to the server, and that the appropriate data is getting forward and back.
So you don't even need to do any of that plumbing at all?
Nope.
Wow. That's it?
Yeah, that's pretty much it. Well, the only thing we need to change is obviously the grid. You might have seen how this grid has been configured. So instead of using the forecast, we need to bind it to the data.
Yeah.
We need to change this to the artist ID.
Right.
And this is going to be the name, and the field name is the same. Artist ID.
Mm-hmm. And you need the changed line 14 too, right?
You're absolutely right. Well, we can just remove this altogether because the grid will be rendered now, and then because it's loading, it will take care of that loading progress itself.
Nice.
So with this in place, let's see how this runs.
This is exciting.
It is. And I didn't even start about editing or whatsoever. And because that also, if you configure that correctly in the grid, it will work. And this obviously works for Blazor server as well as Blazor client.
You know, for most grids, you have to specify a strong type for each column. Yeah. And you're not doing that. You're just putting in the name of the field name instead of the type. Yeah. Which is interesting. So all of that gets just figured out by the grid. That's cool.
Yeah. And there is another interesting thing, because we are now dealing with our new data grid. You might be aware that we first had our first generation Blazor grids, which we were not entirely happy with because of some internal limitations. And this is our new data grid. And what is also interesting here, those column types that you see, they are all of the DXGrid data column. While with a lot of other data grids, you have to specify whether it is like a text column or like a checkbox column or like a date column, No need for. These are all date columns, and we'll make sure that by default the correct column type is being rendered. Unless you want to change it, you can do that obviously, but this will probably cover most scenarios and it will save you a ton of work.
Okay, let's check it out.
Yeah, so here is the application, and what you'll see is, it's a bit small. Let me zoom it slightly in here. So what you'll see is that it has only fetched like 10 items, and there are 28 pages. If I would go any further, what you'll see is that it is actually loading. Yeah. You see, it's calling the server, it's fetching it. You see?
Yep. Efficiently.
And it doesn't matter if you want to sort it by name.
Right.
You'll see it by the indicator. It will just do it.
I like.
Me too. So, yeah, and then obviously if you want to enable one of the other features, which will take care of this as well, is you can specify an option, show filter row, and we'll hit again. It will also use the filter expressions in this data source load option. So now we have the filter row enabled. Right. And if I would filter, you'll see that it will filter, and it has been done server side.
Ah, okay. AER. I was looking, I thought it was an O.
Oh, it's the font probably.
Don, thanks very much for sharing this with me today.
You're absolutely welcome, Carl.
So maybe some other time we can talk about the XAF stuff that you guys have, because that's also very cool.
Yeah, that is very cool, and it is Blazor. Yeah, and it's awesome.
All right, thanks again. Now back to you in the studio, Carl. Well, that was pretty cool. Of course, if you have any comments or suggestions of topics you'd like to see on Blazor Train, you can leave them here on YouTube or email me at carl@appvnext.com. Hey, thanks for riding the rails with me today. This is where I jump off. I'll see you next time. Blazor Train!